What's going on, family? It's your brother Lawrence here with another episode of Watch God Work. In every episode, we get the distinct pleasure and honor to speak to a brother or sister that's doing exceptional work in every field of human endeavor. And they share their God story, the ways in which God has been at work in their lives, or the ways in which God has been at work in their work. And today, I have a pleasure of speaking to my sister, our sister, Miss Nia Allen. What's going on, sis?
How you doing?
Yo, we were laughing even before this interview started.
Right, right.
um, I was telling Nia that we started off in USDA beef years ago, but I didn't know who she was. um, but I said that's my introduction, to gospel music. Was via our sister, the amazing CeCe Winans, and
Yeah.
I was in New Orleans and listening. I came out of movie theater and they started playing "His Strength Is
Mm,
Perfect," and I got the
mm.
note. So once it burns in your subconscious, the voice.
Yeah.
But obviously that was years ago, and then years later, I'm listening. Not too years, it was not too long after. I hear a song, hear some songs that, and I'm jamming. I'm jamming to this song. I'm like, CeCe got a new jam. She done dropped a new one. Like, and it was just like it was Nia Allen, and I'm hearing that the close off was like Nia Allen. I'm like, you know, I'm like, who is
He's
this?
like, that's not
This
it.
there, you know. Clearly, to even to even it says so much because I don't want to actually make this. I want to stand alone here. Miss Nia Allen, I was introduced to your voice years ago, and it stayed with me. And
Oh,
I think for many people, the gift of your voice that God has given you stays with them, and it's not even just the voice and the tone and intonation. It's the words that are accompany it. And you have been come to know that not only just an amazing worship leader, amazing teacher, someone who is just like and learned and loves God's word, understands the importance and the preeminence and the position of worship in our lives to get to know
mm,
God. But I think in a time that relationships are important, community is important, loving thy neighbor is important. You have been very specific and very clear through the worship music, why that's important and trying to minister people in that regard as you travel the world and do that. And so, but there's more that you're doing that I can't capture fully. And so, as we will begin, I have to start with the question. I already warned you. Who is Nia Allen?
who is Nia Allen? Nia Allen is a worshiper. I love God with all that I have.
Mm,
A woman of faith,
mm,
a woman who has had to live out, live out, at least aim to live out, a life of faith. I've made a lot of, just a woman of faith. And we can go into that later.
mm,
But definitely I've had to demonstrate my faith throughout the years. A woman who is called into, who has a heart for diversity. A woman who is called into the world of racial reconciliation, and I know that it is needed within the body of Christ. I'm a teacher, a singer, a daughter, a friend, and but just most of all, I love God, and I just want to, with all of my life, just please Him in all that I do. Period. Whatever in the different capacities. If I'm singing, if I'm teaching, whatever I'm doing, just my prayer is that I will live a life of worship. And
mm,
not perfect. It's not a call to perfection, but it's just
mm,
this call of like, okay, I know this is what I'm called to do, but just being intentional about just living out, the words of my songs and living out what it is that I'm encouraging other people to do, but living it out and just making sure it's real. When it's real and authentic, people, it connects with people. And so that is just my heart is that I would live it out and be honest and be truthful. So
mm, mm.
I know that was a long answer,
No,
but
no. We ain't doing that. No, this was perfect. We ain't doing that. That was like, no, this is your space, God's space. I am intrigued about the Genesis story for you because I'm in Columbus, Ohio, in my head, and I think that there's a context of coming from a musical family, in
Yeah.
context where grandfather was at the pew and at the pulpit rather. And so
Yeah.
you could say that, oh, I grew up, in the church, and I grew up, with a reverence and an understanding of who God is as a child.
Mhm.
But I
Mhm.
think what's always interesting is just like painting a picture of just what that dynamic is, because I think sometimes this is where people get disconnected from the story when they hear a story of someone coming up in a home, an environment like that. They just assume by culture osmosis, okay, you believe God and that's it, right? And so I just want to just what was the dynamic growing up for you, just tell me how to house the dynamic. How did you cultivate just, okay, clearly the musical family, I have a voice, all that. Just walk us through kind of how that dynamic was, and then ultimately just what was your on ramp with God when it became like, okay, this is me and God beyond just my environment and God.
Yeah, no, that's a loaded question. So I grew up, as you said, I grew up in a musical family, grandfather a pastor. My parents were ministers of music in the church. So music and church were always around me,
Hmm.
right? So, when you grow up in that, it's easy to, you're influenced by it. And so you see it and that's all but I can honestly say I was exposed to it from a young age, but as far as I think there's a difference with being, engrafted in like to this culture and being surrounded by it, and then there comes a time where you start developing your own relationship with God. So I would say my relationship it always happens through trial, right? High school was I grew up in this musical family, grew up around church, but in high school was where I kind of I hit a low point. I had a issue, even in my family. I started, I had a relationship. I was in a relationship that I probably was, well, I wasn't supposed to be in. I started
Hmm.
lying, all kind of stuff. And we went through, me and my family went through a hard time. My parents were like, nope, they took me out of my school. Like it was a lot. They put me into a Christian school. It was like, my whole life changed like my junior year, going into my junior year in high school. And I would say my junior year in high school it was a low point for me, but
Hmm.
that's when I just began to know God for myself, and I just began
Hmm.
crying out. I went to it was called World Harvest Christian Academy,
Hmm.
and they had chapel services, and it's kind of like I got pulled out of all that I knew, and they put me in this environment. And I can honestly say when I was, in those chapel services, and it took my parents pulling me out of that and putting
Hmm.
me in a new environment, for me to just, for me to cultivate my own relationship with God. So I would say my junior year in high school is where that just that intimacy, you grow up around church, and all that. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think once um, going through all of that with my family, I began just crying out. I was like, Lord, I need you. I can't do this on my own, and
Hmm.
I need your help. And that's when I just began to draw closer to God,
Hmm.
and just in crying out. But it's usually, in those low moments where I think in those valley times where it's just like where we're on our knees and we're like, all right, God, I need you. I need you. I can't do it. My parents can't do it, but I need you. And so I would say junior year in high school is where that really started. That seed was planted, and that's where I
Hmm.
really started. Hmm.
I think it's helpful context. I think even for people, because I think there's a skip over, I call, or speeding past, that just says like people just get it to say, I need God, but it's like, why was that? Just knowing that God is there for you,
Yeah.
right,
Mm.
beyond just what or the people around you. I think is really important to have that. But there are levels. I think
Yeah.
the other side of this for me is, I think there's a part of it. I have to make this is funny for me, but like, growing up, I always feel like I always sensed that God was just, right. Even early on, I felt that I never wanted to trade places with people in my
Yeah.
life, right? Because I said, you
Yeah.
never know, right? This happens, but they have this head going on, But one of those things that I felt like God was intentional. Me and my boys used to talk about. I'm like, God, man, I'm thankful you didn't give me a great voice, man, because I'll be out here singing like Jodeci back in the day. Like, so when did you? Clearly you're in a musical family, so there's a give and vote. Just where did you for yourself recognize, like, oh, God gave me this little Thanos superpower with my voice? Like,
Yeah.
like this was mine. When was that moment when you sense like, oh, ooh, this is different?
Yeah. Uh, Man, I literally have been singing since I was 5.
Mm,
But I think after school, it's when I went to Berkeley College of Music in
Yep, yep, yep,
Boston.
yep,
And
yep.
so I think after going to school and being exposed to so many, I don't know, so many talented people and just kind of put in that environment, Berkeley exposed me just to a world of music beyond the church, and just like,
Mm,
oh, this is something I can do for a living. This is something I can actually do this,
mm,
and I would say after school, I got a chance to travel and be a part of a lot of ensembles in school. We traveled the country. We went to Switzerland. We went to
mhm,
Spain and Italy. Like, so, I traveled the world when I was in college, and I think after college, I was like, okay, this. I knew after school, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. I didn't necessarily know about leading worship, but I knew I wanted to do music. And I think Berkeley helped to just cultivate that God-given gift in me. And
mhm,
so but yeah, I think after Berkeley is when I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. I don't know exactly how it's gonna happen, but I know this is what I want to do without a shadow of a doubt as far as leading worship.
mhm,
After school, I went home to Columbus, Ohio. My parents are the ministers of music in the church, and I went home after Berkeley. I was like, okay, I want to do music. I don't know exactly what this is going to look like, but let me just go home, try and figure it out. I moved back home for 3 years. I began serving in my church back home in Ohio. And literally, my mom is singing. She's the worship leader at the church, and she's singing. There's two services. She loses her voice, and she comes to me in between the service and with a hoarse voice, and she says, "Nia, I need you to lead worship the second service." And I was like, "No, that's not what I do." Yeah. We're standing in the sanctuary, and I'm like, "No, I'm not doing it." She just looked at me. She's like, "Nia, I need you to do it." And I was like, so I went to her office. I got the keys to her office. I went there and sat because there's some time between the two
mhm,
services. I went there and I cried and I was like, Lord, I don't know. Because you grow up singing. I've sung in the choir, I've led songs, but for me, like leading worship was just a totally different thing. And I had never done it before. But it was in that moment, like after I was like, Lord, I need you. I don't know how to do this. I need you to show me how to do it. And the song was Lord, You Are Good. She had already done the first service.
mm,
And so she was like, just lead Lord, You Are Good by Israel. Lord, You Are Good and Your mercy. Yeah. And so I literally, after crying and just, I was like, Lord, I need you. I can't do this. I don't know how to do it. I've never done it. And literally, he helped me. And I experienced God. I experienced being used by God in a different way. And so as
mhm,
far as leading worship, that was my introduction to kind of leading worship. It was something I was kind of pushed into, but
mhm,
when I was there, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed that interaction with myself and the congregation and just being used by God in a different way. And
mm,
so that was a pivotal moment for me as far as because there's singing and then there's being a choir and then there's leading worship, and I just believe you function in a different way, and so yeah, I would say that in Columbus, Ohio, when my mother lost her voice was a pivotal moment for me as well, and just I was like, oh, okay, it was something I had never done before,
mm.
but while in it and being I kind of pushed into it, I discovered that I was like, this is what I want to do. I enjoy it. And so God began opening doors within that arena as well. So
This is like I can imagine you like Channel Maddie Clark Lord, like you know, like
right.
you're the part of that thing. And but there's also this thing which I just think I call this as like the spoils of riches, and maybe we take for granted greatness, often, which is you spent from 5 years old all the way to Boston. It took Boston to kind of say
Yeah.
maybe this is something. I think part of that is just that, and I think I thank God for church. I didn't grow up in the church per se. My family wasn't from the country, and so though but faith was important. From a cultural standpoint, we went to
Yeah.
church, but I think the Black church experience was something I learned more about later because my family
Okay.
wasn't from here, right? But I just think sometimes we're spoiled by the gifts that in the
Mm.
local church. If I can imagine, like you were singing this entire time and nobody tapped you on your shoulder, it's because like around, because like I just imagine you're surrounded by everybody. You like you sound great, but everybody's sounding great, and
Yeah.
so like I was laughing. I was trying to keep the laughing. Like as I was like, you wait until Boston until you got the little
Yeah.
tap on your shoulder, right? So I just don't want to miss that because I do think that sometimes there are people who may be called beyond that, but because of there's so much talent, there's so much gifting, so
Mm.
much anointing in that space. Sometimes people do not kind of follow that prompting. that where this
Mm,
is. You talked a bit about just exercising faith in real time, right? And so
mm.
this was not Boston wasn't the only place that you traveled from. From that time that you're in Ohio, from the time that you got that little Joshua tap on the shoulder, like you need to step up. Now now you're imagining like, all right, there's Music City. You find yourself in Nashville. You find yourself in many different places. So talk to us about kind of that moment just with God where you're like, all right, I'm home. I'm being faithful to local church. I'm trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do. I'm enjoying now. I'm in this space now. I'm back here doing, I'm doing I'm doing my thing. What was that transition to now recognize? All right, God, I need to step, and you need to meet me in another state somewhere else.
Yeah, so after school, after Berkeley, I went home to Columbus, Ohio for 3 years and served in my local church there. And I just knew, I don't know, after much time, I didn't just, it wasn't hastily, but I took time to just, I knew there was something more. And I was like, okay, Lord, I just began praying
Mm,
and just a time of consecration and
mm,
about praying about, Lord, what's next? And Nashville it came. And
mm,
so, um, I prayed. I actually took my mother and I. We drove down there, and I was like, "Mom, I feel like I'm
mm,
supposed to move to Nashville." And so, when I talk about those leaps of faith, that was definitely a leap of faith for me going from Ohio to Nashville. I literally went on a prayer and a word from God. I didn't
mm,
know anyone, or at the time, I didn't realize that I knew anyone there. I'll explain that later. But
mm,
I literally, once I knew that's where I was supposed to go, I took a step of faith and I moved. I packed up my car and I drove a 6 hour drive. I drove and I stayed actually in a hotel. I can't. I stayed in a hotel for about a week. Well, I told my church in Ohio, and so my pastor blessed me. They
mm.
sewed into me before I left, and so I had a little bit of money,
A
and
little
so
bit of change.
I'm so I literally, yeah, I got my car and I drove to Nashville, Tennessee. And I stayed, I didn't know where I would stay. I stayed in a hotel for about a week. And then once I got there, after I made that step of faith, I got a phone call. A lady that I sung at her wedding when I was like 15 years old. She lived there, and I didn't know she lived there. And she was like, "Nia, are you here?" And I was like, "Yes." And she was like, "Do you need somewhere to stay?" And I was like, "Yes, I do." I can't believe it. This is my first time I think publicly even saying this, but yeah, I stayed in the hotel for a week, and then when she called, I ended up staying with her for about maybe another few weeks, and I got planted in the church there. Took on a temp job, and I eventually found my own place. But it was definitely a leap of faith going from Ohio to Nashville. But I just knew, I think, I don't know, when you begin just kind of like cultivating your own relationship with God, just through a lot of prayer. It wasn't like I said, it wasn't a quick decision. This
Mm,
was like months of like praying and just feeling unsettled. I was like, I know
mm,
more. And so I just began praying, and Nashville came. And once I knew and once I was certain, that's when I took that leap of faith. And once I got there, doors began to open. I mean, there were times, was it all easy? Absolutely not. There were times where I was crying in my hotel room, like, all right, what did I just do, Lord? Did I hear you right? But God was faithful in it, and He did not let my foot slip, not one time, and
mm,
like I said, yeah, after I made that took that leap of faith is when doors began to open. And
mm.
so yeah. And so moving from Ohio to Nashville was definitely a leap of faith. And so then when I had to move from Nashville to California, I was like, oh, well, God kept me in Nashville. So I'm like, I know He's gonna keep me if I'm going to California.
Mhm.
It was another faith move, but I was in school, so that's what brought me out here to California. But
Mm,
yeah, no, I think just God was faithful in it. And so like when I just talk about that living a life of faith, I mean, yeah, God honors it, and I don't know, I would just encourage someone to take time to see God. And it was it was prayer, it was turning down my plate, and but once I had that peace and that assurance, I was like, all right. And I just know that, yeah, it's what scripture says, it's impossible to please God without faith. And I just believe He rewarded it, and I was like, Lord, the whole time I was like, all right, Lord, I'm trusting in you. Like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I believe this. I heard from you, and so I'm just going with that. So
mm.
yeah,
This is, shout out to Hebrews, man. That it's one, I want to even like just pull this piece out because I think for some people who are hearing this, they're like, "Wait, what? So she heard from God? Like, what does that mean, right? Like, like, yeah, but like, I love how you talk to it, right? It's something you're like, this wasn't an immediate thing. Like, it was over time. I was just
Mhm.
sensing. But what was kind of like the heard from God? Was it just like I had a dream and Nashville came up? I kept seeing commercials with that. Like, what was that? The Nashville came out of the blue. Where was that coming from?
Mm, I don't want to sound sweet. Honestly, I think just how do I explain it? I'm trying to think of it as practical at
Describe
this
it for
explain.
somebody who's like, "Yo, I don't know what they're talking about." When they say like God, like in
Yeah,
what ways did you,
yeah.
or was it just a knowing sense?
I think it was just an inner knowing sense.
Mm,
Yeah, I think it was just an inner knowing sense. And
mm,
even me kind of in just praying, you start to look at different cities and I'm like, where could I see myself living? Or where would I, where as far as next, as far as music, what would make sense? And so
mm,
I think as I was like, what about Nashville? As I began to present that before God and that I think it was a combination of God speaking, but also it being a part of kind of where I want it to be, and
mm,
placing that request before God. Well, I wonder if Nashville would be, what about Nashville? And when I say that, like in my searching, I had a piece about that, So I
mm,
think it was a combined effort of a God thing, but also me kind of, what about Nashville? Putting that request before God, and then me sensing a piece about that. I'll just say
mm.
that way.
No, no,
Yeah.
no, I think I get it. Like, and it's just refreshing to hear that amount of faith, but also it's a bit comical to say like you went down, but that's just how faith is. You went down there, hotel game, was not sure about what you're gonna do, so you didn't like really have. I'm pretty sure you had a kind of plan, like God, you're just gonna meet me here, but you didn't. Like you went there,
I
stayed in the
know,
hotel,
man.
and you
I'd
get the
never done
call.
anything like that before. My parents would look at me like, huh? But my mother, I love her dearly. She said, well, you know what, Nia? She's like, you can always come home. And I was like, you're right. So I was wrong. If I got it wrong, she was like, you got somewhere you can come back to. I was like, thank you.
How close was it though? Because I can imagine you say you were in your room, you know what I'm saying? Like you're like, I need to go back to Egypt. At least we ate. Like was what was it that in those moments, right when you're about to like God showed up with something, or it was just I told myself over time I'm not turning back. Like how did you navigate that? Because I think some people get confused about like, all right, how do you know like maybe you didn't hear from God? Like where do you put your cutoff? How do you navigate that liminal gray area of all right, I'm here, God. Something ain't happening yet. I'm gonna wait, but how long do I wait? Maybe I heard you wrong. I'm being open to that in faith. Like, how did you navigate that in that time?
It was a lot of wrestling.
Mm,
I think just yeah, like I said, I was sometimes in my hotel room like in tears, like, all right, Lord, I thought I heard you. Is this? But I think it was like little steps along the way. Like when I got the phone call from the lady I sung at her wedding, I was like, okay, when things just start working out slowly but
mm-hmm,
surely, I was like, okay, it worked out. And for me, that was the assurance that I needed. Like, okay, it's working out. God is with me in it. And it just reassured like those little, I feel like I got little glimpse or little stamp confirmations along the way. Like, okay, things just, it wasn't, yeah, God just, he provided along the way. And so I don't
mm-hmm.
know if that answers your question, but
No,
I
it does.
know, yeah. For me, it was those were little glimpses like, okay, I'm with you in it and I got you. And
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, yeah, I don't
No, 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 no,
know.
no. This is helpful. I just I'm walking it out for people because I think the next part of what I want you speaking, even kind of pre LA, but maybe we could kind of tie it in both. Is just you just don't do one thing. So it's just not the singing. Got MDiv, now again the doctor ministry. You were learning and teaching, like learning at least during that time. And so I can try to get sequencing down. But how free did you feel to sense that you had these different gifts? Because I think a wrestle in these times for many people is there's information overload. You're also looking at people doing so many different things. You're watching social media. and also there's kind of just economic fallenness, people struggling, and so they feel they have to
Yeah.
do multiple things. But then sometimes you hear almost the course correction of discipleships under the word of like, you need to focus that because you lack faith. But there's the I'm a worship leader, right? I'm someone who believes and I love to sing, right? But then there's also I'm a teacher. It seems like it goes hand in hand, but those are still, even people will make careers in and of themselves on one, right? And
Yeah.
so, just how are you cultivating this part of? And you're a songwriter, so how are you making space to do these things? And then, did you ever feel like I'm doing too much, or I'm not doing too much? Like what was that like?
Yeah, I think I don't know. It's like I don't know. So in my undergrad, my degree was in music education,
Hmm.
and so my dad, he's an educator and he's a music. He's also a musician, and I was kicking and screaming. I did not want to get educated.
That's how it
I just
always
want to.
goes, huh?
I want to perform, like. And he was like, Nia, do the music ed. He's like, you'll thank me for it later. And sure enough, he was right. So I got my education degree in undergrad.
Hmm.
And did I know at the time that I necessarily didn't want to teach, but I was kind of looking at it as like, well, I'll do it as a plan B. But I will say that degree has helped me along the way. When opportunities weren't always there musically to sing, I was like, well, I can teach. And honestly, over time, I've grown to enjoy it. I
Mm.
do enjoy teaching. I served as like a substitute teacher. And then I also served as an adjunct professor, like when I went to Nashville. But my point is, I guess I don't know. It wasn't something that I necessarily planned, and actually, I was kind of kicking and screaming. But I was like, oh, okay. After a while, sometimes I have to. I think God has shown me like, okay, you can do this. And so,
Mm.
so having the music ed degree has definitely opened up different teaching opportunities. And sometimes it was for the love of it. Sometimes it was like, okay, this is another stream of income. And so
Mm.
I've never felt overwhelmed. I think they all just kind of worked together. And I've never just
Mm.
done one thing. Like even, I left Ohio with a CD. I did the first CD, a new thing with my dad. But my point is I've always done multiple things. Like even when I
Mm.
was serving as a worship leader, I was serving as a background singer. And then I was also teaching. It was just, those were the opportunities before me and I took them. And it just seemed like they all just kind of worked together. They weren't in competition with one another.
Mm.
It just kind of all worked together,
Mm.
and not necessarily anything that I planned, but I think that's just been my story growing up in a musical family with educators. Both my parents have their doctorate, and so education was huge in our family. I didn't necessarily uh, seek to be a teacher or adjunct professor, but it's kind of like it. Like even right now, I'm serving as an adjunct professor at Azusa Pacific University,
Mm.
and usually stuff like that, I'll get a phone call. I didn't necessarily go looking for it. Usually stuff like that'll come to me,
Mm.
honestly. And so, to answer your question, I feel like they don't compete with one another, but they've always complemented one another, and they've all kind of worked together. That's kind of been my story. So I'm able to sing. I'm able to lead worship on Sundays. I'm able to teach during the week and serve as an adjunct professor. Um, I'm able to still travel on the weekends if I need to and serve as a worship artist. I'm able to write songs from time to time as they come. I think it just all works together. And I don't
Mm.
feel overwhelmed. It's just a part of who I am.
Yeah.
And it wasn't planned, but I feel like that's what it is. It's just a part of who I am and who God has called me to be. So
No,
yeah,
you
He
know
gives
you're
me
speaking.
grace. He gives me grace to do
Yeah, yeah,
it.
no, you're speaking. I think you're gonna free people up. I know that that's a wrestle I've had. Even for myself, but I know for many people, who just I've always done every. Like it's just like even my track was like I did multiple things. That was my event, right?
Yeah.
Like, and so sometimes you're just trying to quote unquote. I heard the saying like you don't need to. Like God knows how to humble you. You don't need to find opportunities to humble you. Like try to come humbly
Yes.
for God. Like God, just am I doing to please search me, test me. Help me, but to your point, sometimes an acceptance and like God has worked. You've been okay. Like these are opportunities that work. As you talk about just the you have the door has opened for you to for your gifts to be on display globally, being on tours, ministering to women on weekends, but being the background singer for some amazing acts. What was that when was that break for you? How did God show up in that? Because I'm just excited with like the MJ Popcorn and Thriller, like kind of sitting there like because of you told me about. I'm like, oh, she was in the hotel and then she got the call at 5:45. I like what was that hotel you know what I'm saying, situation with that, you started getting breaks and opportunities to now, go on the road. What did that look like? How did God show up?
You mean the journey from the hotel to
Journey
yeah,
from
yeah.
the
So
hotel to, going on the road with the Binions, going on the road with CC, like I'm just doing
yeah.
that. What was the break?
So I was in a hotel for a week, got a phone call from the friend. I ended up staying with them. I lived with them for a couple of months.
Hmm.
And I began doing the work. I was like, okay, well, I got to get a job. And so I literally reached out to a temp agency and I began just doing temp work. And I began doing temp work. And then I realized, and people knew, word was getting out. They were like, this girl named Nia from Columbus, Ohio just moved here. Da, 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 da. And a mutual friend of mine, his name's Calvin Noel. He lived in Nashville, Tennessee. He's from Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
And he reached out to me actually. I forgot about this. He reached out to me when I was in the hotel and he was like, hey, Nia. And he just introduced himself. And Calvin had already been in Nashville a couple of years. And he was like, well, we need to get connected. We need to get you plugged in, that kind of thing. And we remained great friends. And I think once I was doing temp work. But once I got plugged into my church, I think it helped significantly me being plugged into my church and serving within the ministry because then people are like, oh, this girl can sing, and so hotel, moving with the family, temp work, began serving my church, being faithful there. Word begins to spread like there's this girl named Nia Allen. And when I moved there, I had a CD. I did my first CD in Columbus, Ohio. So I came there with a CD. So people were like, this girl can sing. And I'm giving you a condensed version. This was over maybe a year's time. And but yeah, as I began getting plugged into my church, a lot of the musicians that play in the church are also involved in industry. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's honestly my first background gig per se was for Nicole C. Mullen, and that was through Calvin that I met. And he was like, "Hey, Nicole's doing audition." Well, I don't even think I had to audition. They were just like, "Hey, she can sing alto. We need a singer for Nicole next week." And I was like, "What?" So that was like my into so having great relationships. Thank God for solid relationships because that was key in my introduction to the industry. It's just knowing, it's having just genuine relationships with people. And so I started with Nicole. I traveled with her for about a year, and then there was this conference called Women of Faith, and I did audition for that, but I got a phone call saying, "Hey, I got invited to audition," and so
Mm-hmm.
but once I did Women of Faith, it was like 10,000 women every weekend. I had never done anything like that before, but I was a part of the worship team, and I traveled with them for about 3 years. But I got invited and called to do an audition with them, and I made the team. And but yeah, I was with them for about 3 years, and honestly, I had never done anything on that scale before. So yeah, I learned a lot. I have had a lot of on the job training, but I learned a lot and got a chance to continue building great relationships because like top of the line CCM contemporary Christian artists. That's where I was kind of introduced into that whole CCM world was by doing Women of Faith. I didn't grow up listening to contemporary Christian music. I grew up in a Black Baptist church. And so I'm in this arena with 10,000 women. It's predominantly white. I'm the
Mm-hmm.
only Black girl on the worship team. And I was like, what is this? Like, I had to learn new genres of music. I was like, I don't know these songs. Like, literally, it was an introduction into this new world. And I was like, wow. And so, but yeah, so I traveled with them for 3 years. So it's kind of just one thing kind of like started leading to another. And just,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, through relationship and people knowing that you can sing, it's like you get invited to be a part of different things. If that goes well, it just continues. So that was yeah, like even with the conference, people like Sandy Patty, like people who are huge in that. I was introduced to these people in that realm just within my first couple of years in Nashville. But again, through relationships and just kind of just taking it one step at a time. But yeah, it was a journey. It was definitely a journey.
I just love, I love how you speak about the local church. But I also, I think we take for granted in these times that, the dynamic for many people, right? Who've been, the transience is up, right? People are kind of moving, navigating, where just not prioritizing, not so much as church, but just community, to your point, relationships, that you were able to get plugged in, that there were people kind of there, and that again, it wasn't just this quick fell swoop, it was over time, but just kind of like the opportunities came as you served, as you did that. And I think sometimes we overlook, we want to make things very, very complicated, and sometimes it's
Mm,
this, it's the everyday faithful commitment to community and to people and that you
Yeah.
may will not control it, but in that God kind of one affirms your gifts and also gives opportunities for you to do that. So I think that's also what I also laugh because I'm a very big, business entrepreneurship. I'm like, you had a CD. I was like, you're like Master P getting about the trunk. You know what I'm saying? You like, I got the CD. you know, uh,
And I honestly was scared to tell people, but the people were like, "You better tell people. You know she got a CD, right?" And I was like, "I hate, oh man." So yes, but it got to it where I did have CDs in my trunk, and I was like, "Damn, you
I got product, y'all. I got product.
I got
Yep. Yo, just the adoration. So, like, it exudes from you. I kind of commented before we talked about just there's hmm, there's a glowing sense, but there's like an adoration. Like it seems like you're just enjoying, you're having a good time along the way, right? Not knowing that it's not perfect. I'm pretty sure your prayer closet is real, but
yeah.
there's also this perspective on just global. You have this global perspective, and maybe that was Switzerland, in college. Maybe it was that, but for you then, traveling, doing the tours, and doing this, when do you get a sense that in your writing that you just said, I have to spend my heart for racial reconciliation, justice, for unity, that revelation picture. When did that really get affirmed for you in your journey of like having this to the ends of the earth perspective towards your music, and even just your latest project now, where it's just like this every nation perspective? When did that really start to get solidified for you?
Traveling with the conference, Women of Faith, and
Mm,
it was a wonderful experience for me. I was there about 3 years. I traveled with them as a part of the worship team on the worship team, and I just began to, like I said, I grew up in a Black Baptist church, so I'm used to seeing predominantly Black people, and then I go to this, and I'm traveling with this conference. I'm the only Black girl on the worship team, and there's 10,000 women, and it's predominantly white, and I was like, wait a minute. And so honestly, traveling with that conference just sparked my interest of like, wait, how did we get to that? Why?
mm,
I just noticed a lot of separation in the church. And so I
mm,
was like, and then I was like, how did we get here? And and that's when I began to go to school. And actually I studied it at Vanderbilt, and eventually at Azusa Pacific University. My doctorate is in worship and racial reconciliation in the church.
mm,
But just seeing that, I think through experience, I began to just wonder, okay, Lord, how did we get to this place? And so it sparked my curiosity, and I was like, I want to know
mm,
more about how we got here. And so it forced me to do some research, and so and it was hard to do the research. It was. It was, I ain't gonna say it was disheartening, but it was just kind of like it just showed me how long we've been dealing with racial tension in the United States, and even more so in the body of Christ. And it was just like, man, we've been dealing with this for a long time. But Lord, you put it on my heart, and so clearly you've given me something to say about it right now in this season.
mm,
Sometimes you're like, okay, they fought for the civil rights. We've made progress, but it's just kind of like, okay, I was born in 1981 and it's 2021, right? And so for such a time as this, I believe that God has placed me here for this time to speak about that now, and
mm,
I'm always like, Lord, okay, what what do you want me to say right now in 2021? Because when you look back at the long history of it, it can be kind of frustrating, but I know that God is faithful, and as long as He gives me words to say, I will say it. And so when I was in my doctoral program, worship and racial reconciliation is rooted in Revelation 7 and 9.
mhm,
And when I graduated from the program, the song "Every Nation" just came. It is rooted. It comes from Revelation 7
mhm,
9,
mhm,
and I didn't seek to like sit down and write a song. I literally was walking in my apartment, and just lyrics, just it came from my heart, and just like every nation, every tongue singing hallelujah to our God, all creation crying out, and just I want to see heaven on earth. I just really felt like this it's the heart of God, and
mhm,
so I just began downloading these lyrics, and I was like, all right, let me write it down. Let me write it down. And that was the first song that came on the project, but it was
mhm,
birthed out of that research and that time spent at school. And as soon as I graduated, that was the first song that actually came. And so, yeah, I was like, okay, that was the first song to come. And I was like, let's title that. I want to make that the title of the project.
mhm,
And we were very intentional. I did a live recording at it's a predominantly Black church here in LA. And I was very intentional about inviting some of my white brothers and sisters, Asian brothers and sisters, Hispanic. I want to be very intentional because we know diversity doesn't just happen. There's an intentionality. And so I want to be very intentional about who I invited and just kind of creating this space, this diverse space. And so that was the heart of the night. And I explained that even in one of the tracks, that was the heart of the night. And we just even said a prayer and just let this be our prayer, God, that we would see more unity as it relates to race. And, Revelation is a depiction of what heaven will look like, nation, every tribe, every tongue, declaring that salvation belongs to our God, and He is our God. And so all who have placed their faith in Christ, that's who will be around the throne. That is what worship will look like in heaven. So all this, there won't be a black section, there won't be a white section, there won't be a Hispanic section, there won't be an Asian section. It will be us all worshiping God together. And so my prayer is like, okay, how can we create this here right now? We don't have to wait until we get there, but let's create heaven. What worship will look like in heaven, let's create that here on earth. And so that was the heart of that night. That's the heart of the song. That's the heart of the EP. And so, yeah.
No, it's powerful, and I don't want to just say like timely, because I just think that's a very succinct cliche, but it really is timely, because there's a need for that. You need that tension, and you need to yearn for something, right? If you're thirsting, it's an evidence of the very existence of the very thing you're thirsting for. To some degree, there's also the reality of like, this is already but not yet, but like heaven hits earth, and that's like our job to bring it, right? That people would know that the kingdom is at hand. And so I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm going to ask another sort of question, maybe even, and yeah, I don't think it'll throw you off, because but when I think about just the revelation of God, and just what God has equipped, particularly brothers and sisters who believe in, who put their faith in Jesus, and who are operating in these spheres, and for you in the gospel music, but you're in the music business. And for me, coming from a business perspective, a lot of times I've asked myself the question, even early in my walk, even before kind of going deeper theologically in my study, was just, yo, where are the Christians in the music business? Because I would think about the business models of ownership, of distribution, of this. I'm like, why are the creators getting the least of everything? Like, in my mind, I said, why hasn't people taken a redemption view towards the model? Where are the people of faith that are helping to push this forward so it's more equitable, so these people are not ending? Has that ever been a part of your journey? As you're creating music, but recognizing that the institution of the business in many verticals of the music business has, alienated the creator, right? Who created the content creator, the singer, the like. Has there ever been a wrestle inside, both as someone who's educated, both as someone who's understand, that's just like, I don't know if this is the most equitable way that we should be doing this here on earth in terms of just the nature of this business? Has that been a conversation? Has that been something, a prayer with you and God, or something you even experienced yourself in the business?
Not really, not for me. I think as a creative, I think my heart has just been toward, creating and
Mm,
just producing the music and writing the music that I feel like God has given. That has just kind of been my heart and my goal. Um, but I think early on I did learn that, okay, this is a business. You know what I'm saying? And I
mm,
even asked the record executive, like, what is that balance between music ministry and business? And I
mm,
think what I've learned along the way is that, my job is to create and to write and present what I believe God has given. And then I'm prayerful and partner with business minded people, who
mm,
I do believe are Christians and believers, and that are integral and that function, and great work ethic, function in excellence, integrity. And I thank God that He has given me that right now.
mm,
So I would say me not that's not my strength, and so I
mm,
focus on the creative aspect, and then I'm prayerful about, okay, Lord, who's my team? I've been praying for a
mm,
while. Lord, send me a strong team of people who are believers, who are integral, who are excellent in what they do and business minded, because there is this business aspect of it, but I let them handle that. I can't
mhm.
get involved in this aspect of it, because that's, first of all, that's not my strength. And I'll let y'all do that, because that's not even what I do. I'll roll in my strength, you roll in your strength. I operate in my strength, and you operate in your strength. I think
Mm,
that's key. Like when building a team, find people who are strong in that area, and then bring them along the way. But Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, so I try to partner, be prayerful, and partner with business-minded, integral people. So.
Mm. No, no, this is helpful. Because to the point, I think there's so much wisdom in that. And I was having a conversation with our sister Do Jones, and she
Mhm.
was talking about just like, just I call like the holy agitation, blessed burden, right? There are things that you're called to lean into, right?
Mm,
They're innumerable. If you want to find the issues, you don't worry, just open your eyes. There are things that
right,
are not the way it's supposed to be in heaven, right? But
right.
part of God's leading is just which one is your burden that He's called you to do so. And so I think there's this wisdom in that. I have to ask this question before I even as we close: is you? I think there is a kind of they talk about the soul and the stomach, right? The felt need and how the gospel renews us physically, mentally. Um, I think brothers and sisters, many of them in this season of lament, often there's also just like people are burning out, right? Just the work is falling. People are burning on both sides, managing family, managing all that stuff, trying to be a good sister, husband. Everybody's trying to do their best, and so much is going out.
Mm,
Just what is your rhythm with God? And I say this to say that there's a lot coming out, right? Obviously, your
mhm,
source is God, but there's so much that you're doing. How do you make space for life and you're working and you're not, so you don't burn out? Because that was some of the sense of their initial question. You're like, yeah, I'm good. I'm not overwhelmed. And so I think the curiosity is, what is your rhythm with God? What is your ideal rhythm with? How do you connect with God in a way that
mm,
allows you to have just a healthy rhythm that's sustainable for the rest of your life?
mm. No, that's a great question. I believe we as human beings, we are mind, body, and spirit. And so I
Mm,
try to, as a human being, I'm like daily in the morning, and it's not out of ritual or routine, but I have to start off my day just with quiet time. I
mm,
have to, because I pour out, pour out, pour out. I have to create a space in the morning. Whether it's, I try to do, I don't even gonna get a time limit. I
mm,
just have to create a space in the morning, first thing in the morning, just to create a space where God can dwell, where He can speak to my heart, where I can get refueled in His presence. That is often through opening up scripture, if I have a devotional, if it's listening to music, worship music, that helps to create an atmosphere. But for me personally, that is what I have to do to get my day started. Just
mm,
a spiritual refueling and a refreshing. And so there's a scripture in John 15 that says, Jesus reminds us that He is the vine and we are the branches. And so we have to stop my that's been my verse like through this pandemic. It's just like I have to stay connected to my source and my lifeline. I know that I'm absolutely nothing without God, and I need the presence of God in my life. And so for me, that's how I stay refueled. I have to start my day off, and I can
mm,
feel it when I don't. I'm like, and I don't beat myself up. It's just like
mm,
I know what I need.
mm,
So spiritually, just I have to start off my day just making sure I connect, and then continue just the conversation throughout the day in my car. Keeping that worship music on. When I feel myself getting stressed or overwhelmed, I'm like, mm-mm. Let me put on some music that will set an atmosphere because I need peace. And so
mm.
worship is the presence of God is just it's a safe place. It's my hiding place, and so I need it.
Mm,
Physically, I love to work out. I love just yeah. I feel better. It helps to relieve stress. So even if I go outside and walk,
mm,
I'm in California, obviously, so the weather, but I can go outside. It's just the vitamin D, the sun.
mm,
I have to do that. Just it helps me mentally just to get my day started, and
mhm,
physically, I'm like I feel better after I work out. And so,
mhm.
I mean, I ain't skinny. Skinny don't run in my family, but I just believe in being healthy. And so I'm like, it's about being healthy and just exercising your body. And so
Mm,
um, yeah, and so I work out 4 to 5 days a week,
mm,
just for me, for my own well being. I mean, I would love to lose another 10 pounds, but that's just personal goal. But I'm like, but daily, it just helps me mentally, it relieves stress and it helps you physically. So
mm,
I try to be balanced in that way. And even just outside of spiritual, sometimes I can work, 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 like I'm teaching during the week. And I'm like, you know what? I got to be balanced. I'm like, we can't work hard. If I'm going to work hard, I'm going to play hard. So
mm,
I'm trying to be more intentional in this season about just being more balanced. I work hard, I do a lot. And so taking that time to enjoy time with friends, go watch a movie with friends or go to the beach. I can go, I don't go as much, but I need to go. I've started going more often and being more intentional about it. It's like, Nia, take time to enjoy life and just
mm,
outside of the spiritual aspect, outside of the physical, outside of work, work, work. take time to just enjoy life, and just have fun. And so I try to be intentional and just balance, just live a balanced life,
Mm.
yeah, mind, body, spirit, and just, yeah, have fun. I love to have fun. I love to laugh. I love a good movie. So yeah, I love to just have fun. So I'm like, look, I gotta enjoy my life. So yeah, just trying to be balanced and well rounded.
No, no, this is the word, because this is the word I think for this week. I struggle sometimes. I work, and I have my Sabbath, I have my little, cheat day. I have my McDonald's, or watch my movies, and but I think, especially in view of the pandemic, I think people have been isolated in just a marked way. So
Yeah,
it's just that much more important for us to have that, and to pursue it. It's not perfect, but
yeah,
pursuing that, I think is so important. Yo, it's hard for me to have this conversation with you and not think that you don't have fun, because the way you laugh, and the way it's just such a great energy, and you've blessed us so much,
oh,
with just so much wisdom, and I think, like I said, it just, some people ask the question, it's just like, it's like, why, you speak to gospel artists and people that their work is God, right? I just said, like, yes, and but also, it's not just the praxis of it; it's the real life of,
mm,
like, who is God really to me? Why is He really good news to me? How actually has He been making Himself known through my career? What has He spoken to me? Why is that important for you to know? And you just been, just think, refreshing for in terms of just how you tell your story. I have I'm gonna ask this: what's ahead? Right? There's a lot that you're doing. You got EP, is up on the charts, like, especially, re-release. I'm just like, man, she gonna microwave this thing up, and everything is good, right? So, but you think you got what I'm saying? Like, I'm like, this is so great. Like, so what's ahead? I'm pretty sure you're writing, you're doing things, but what is your plan ahead in view of COVID, in view of what's happening? What do people have to look forward to in the near future?
yeah, well, I think things are starting to open up.
Hmm.
So, as you said, we have the EP Every Nation, and the song Wait that's on there is doing really, really well on Billboard. I'm excited about that. I've never
Yes.
been on a chart before. So it's hilarious. I was like, we're what number? So I have a great radio promoter. He's amazing. And so he just works hard, just integral, and just I'm grateful. So yeah, the song Wait is doing really, really well. It's being just heard on radio stations around the country. And so next, we're working on the next single we want to release. The goal is to get weight as high as we can, and just get it exposed to as many people as we can. And then just the next single, I think we're going to do another. I don't know if I can say we're working on the next single right now, releasing the next
Yeah.
single. It'll be upbeat because I mean it's summertime, so something it'll be definitely upbeat, and just create some content. But yeah, it'll be an upbeat song for the summertime. But release that to radio, and as things are starting to open up, I'm hoping that we can do like a mini tour. That's kind of where the works of that right, working on that right now. And so I'm in California, but the song is being played a lot, like on the East Coast,
Mm-hmm.
down South, and Midwest. And so we're kind of in the works of putting together a tour. And so I'm hoping I can come out that way within the next couple of months. So that's kind of what we have going on right now.
And please
Yeah.
do, please, y'all got to do the Chappelle flow. The Chappelle flow is go do it outdoor, have people on their little
Right.
thing, little distanced out. You know what I mean? And just let
Yeah.
people enjoy, just and get it out the trunk. Have the single in your trunk. We go
And
with
I
this.
think in live events, people are starting to do live events, like you said, 6 feet apart and spread
Mm-hmm.
out. But I think we've been in the house so long, I feel like people are ready to get out and just.
Yeah.
I didn't value being around people and community as much as I have. You don't realize what you have until it's gone. You're like, wait a minute, I miss being around people, And so I'm excited. I'm ready. I'm ready to get out there. Yeah, I would love to just be around people. There's a difference. You can worship by yourself, or you can, do things by yourself, but there's something different that happens in community. And so I value community now more than ever. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
I've been intentional about FaceTiming people. I'm like, hey, just being intentional about staying connected with people because there's something that happens, in community. And we need one another. We've been isolated for so long, but we need one another. So yeah.
Yo, you speak in my language. I always say God is a community in and of Himself. There's like this transformer,
Yeah,
something is unlocked when we are around others, and then there's certain parts of us we can't even tap into, because certain people, like the C.S. Lewis quote, that pull out parts of
it's
us,
true.
and when they go, that part of us goes. So
It's true.
I'm thankful. Where do people find you? I know how to find you online, but where do people find you online? How could they find you?
Yeah, Nia Allen Music on all platforms: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I would love to stay connected with you guys. But Nia Allen Music is my social. My website, niaallenmusic.com. Yeah, the EP, the Every Nation album that we have, it's available on all digital platforms. So be sure to go check that out: YouTube, Spotify, Pandora, wherever you listen or download music. But yeah, Nia Allen Music. I would love to stay connected with you guys.
Nia, I thank you. We love you. We family. And I'm just thankful for your ministry. I'm thankful for your work, and I'm thankful for your life. So thank you, thank you, thank you for spending time with us. There'll be many more conversations to come in faith. All right. Speak to you soon.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
No problem.